name is Noah Carr, and this is my case report analyzing the psychological disorder portrayed in David Fincher's 1999 film, Fight Club. The narrator is an unnamed white-collar professional in his late 20s to early 30s, portrayed by Edward Norton. He leads a deeply isolated existence, insomniac, emotionally detached, and consumed by consumerism as a substitute for a genuine human connection. The film takes place in late 1990s America, a cultural moment defined by a corporate alienation and a crisis of masculine identity. Men of this era were heavily conditioned by social norms that discouraged emotional vulnerability or help-seeking behavior. This cultural context is critical. It not only shapes the narrator's psychological deterioration, but it also significantly impacts the likelihood of nature of any clinical intervention he might receive. The disorder I am diagnosing is dissociative identity disorder, DSM-5 code 300.14. DID is characterized by the presence of two or more distinct personality states or identities that recurringly take control of an individual's behavior, typically accompanied by an amnesia and a profound disruption of sense of self. In the film's late 1990s American context, a clinician would likely diagnose DID, though only after extended evaluation, as DID was frequently misdiagnosed as schizophrenia or depression during this period, as noted by Piper and Merksey in 2004. It is also important to recognize that DID is not equally recognized across all cultures. While dissociative states are documented globally, their interpretation varies considerably. Some cultures, for example, understand these experiences through a spiritual or possession framework rather than a psychiatric one, as discussed by Luis Fernandez and colleagues in 2007. Additionally, in Western society, DID carries substantial stigma. Patients are often portrayed as dangerous or unstable, and men in particular face cultural barriers to acknowledging psychological distress, which further compounds the diagnostic challenge. Turning now to the clinical evidence, I'll discuss two symptoms the narrator clearly displays. The first is a disruption of identity corresponding to DSM-5 criteria A, the presence of two or more distinct personality states. The narrator creates Tyler Durden, a bold, charismatic, and entirely separate identity with his own goals, social relationships, and worldview. Crucially, the narrator has no awareness that Tyler is a manifestation of himself. This is illustrated throughout the film in moments where the narrator refers to Tyler in the third person, reflecting genuine fragmentation of self-concept. The second symptom is recurrent amnesia corresponding to DSM-5 criteria B. The narrator repeatedly loses time, waking in unfamiliar locations, discovering acts of violence he cannot account for, and having no memory in founding either Fight Club or Project Mayhem while Tyler was in control. This is consistent with research by Brandon colleagues in 2016, which found that amnesia is present in approximately 80% of confirmed DID diagnoses. The symptom with the weakest evidence is DSM criteria C, clinically significant distress or functional impairment. While the narrator's internal suffering is evident, his outward functioning remains largely intact for much of the film. He holds his job, maintains his apartment, and engages with colleagues without obvious collapse. Furthermore, certain behaviors, such as joining Fight Club and forming social bonds through it, could be interpreted as adaptive coping rather than impairment. The film deliberately blurs the line between psychological breakdown and personal liberation. This ambiguity is actually clinically meaningful, as Lauritsen noted in 1991. High-functioning individuals with dissociative disorders frequently present without obvious impairment, which poses a real diagnostic challenge for clinicians. For a proposed treatment plan, I would recommend phase-based psychotherapy, specifically a combination of trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and EMDR, with an overarching goal of facilitating communication between identity states and ultimately integration. This approach aligns with the gold standard guidelines published by the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation and is supported empirically by Brand and colleagues in 2012, who found that trauma-focused therapy significantly reduces dissociative symptoms and improves global functioning. There are, however, important ethical concerns. A therapist must maintain neutrality toward all identity states without inadvertently reinforcing fragmentation. Perhaps most critically, the narrator's alter, Tyler Durden, has disclosed involvement in criminal activity. This creates a serious ethical conflict under duty to warn obligations, which requires careful navigation. From a cultural and situational standpoint, multiple barriers stand in the way of the narrator receiving treatment. A late 1990s stigma around mental health, particularly for men, would make help seeking unlikely. His general cynicism towards institutional systems extends to medicine, and Tyler's alter ego would actively resist any therapeutic intervention. In evaluating the film's portrayal of DID, the picture is mixed. On one hand, the depiction of amnesia, identity fragmentation, and the coexistence of contrasting personality states is largely consistent with the DSM-5 criteria and reflects a degree of clinical accuracy. On the other hand, the portrayal is problematic in key ways. DID rarely manifests as a fully autonomous, independently acting alter that is entirely invisible to the host. The film's dramatic twist oversimplifies a deeply complex lived experience. More concerning is the association drawn between DID and explosive violence. Research by Foote and colleagues in 2006 consistently shows that individuals with DID are far more likely to be victims of violence rather than perpetrators, making this portrayal not only inaccurate but actively stigmatizing. More broadly, films like Fight Club have an outsized influence on public understanding of mental illness. As Corrigan and colleagues noted in 2005, popular media is the primary source of mental health knowledge for most people. When that knowledge is built on dramatic distortions, it creates misconceptions that clinicians must actively work to correct, and that can deter real patients from seeking help. These are the sources supporting this case report formatted in APA 7th edition. Thank you for watching.